Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is training, and we're going to cover back development for aesthetics. So recently a friend on social media posted a picture of their back, and they mentioned that they had gotten thick, wider in their back, but they hadn't developed thickness yet. So, kind of prompted me an idea to make a podcast about back development, specifically for aesthetics. So, in general, I have helped clients earn pro cards in aesthetics, and I've helped tons of people do aesthetic-based training like bodybuilding competitions, figure fitness, physique, bikini, blah, 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 blah. So, I have a ton of experience doing that, and I've been personal training for 17 years. I've been lifting weights myself for 20. So I have plenty experience and well over 1,000 client history base. So lots of information. Now, I'm going to present you some opinions and whatnot, and I promise if you try these, they'll work because they've worked for hundreds and hundreds of people. And then I'll give you resources of some places to go look for more information. So, in general, the back actually does develop before it develops thickness. That's kind of a normal kind of growth pattern of the back. And that's true for overwhelmingly most people. Are there some exceptions? Sure. But that's actually the way that the back grows most. Now, the exceptions that happen are going to come from kind of usually anatomy differences. So if somebody has really high lat inserts, and this is kind of like people have kind of debates over this all the time. As like, does one person's insertion point really actually any higher or lower than another's because it all comes from the upper arm down to the hip bone and blah, 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 blah. So there are genetical differences in terms of the length of the muscle belly available to each person. Okay. You also have collarbone widths, like shoulder widths. If somebody has a wider kind of shoulder structure, they're going to automatically have better lat development than somebody with a narrower shoulder structure. So there's a lot of variances that come from anatomy differences. So somebody can be, for example, somebody can be doing everything right, and their back just will not grow very well compared to somebody who's doing everything kind of medium, but they have perfect aesthetics, like anatomy for back development. So someone's back development isn't actually a direct indicator of how good of a trainer or a client or, whatever they are. Sometimes people are just gifted with better things than other people. So people in the NBA are like 6'7", 6'8". You might have the best basketball player in the history of the world was only 5'3". Okay, and except for Muggsy Bogues, no one else is getting in the NBA at 5'3". Okay, so sometimes we're just given gifts. Some people are given gifts of awesome backs due to their anatomy and genetics. Some people are limited in their back development due to anatomy and genetics. Now, with all that said, how do you become the best of you? For whatever is available to you, anatomy and genetics wise, how do you become the best of that? That's what we're going to cover today. So, the number one reason why people will have limited back development, absolutely without a doubt, number one reason, okay, is going to be the need to understand scapular movement while doing back exercises. You need to allow your shoulder blades to move. So on YouTube, if you go under YouTube and just search the words Brutal Iron Gym Scapular, and scapular is S-C-A-P, S-C-A-P-U-L-A-R, scapular. Brutal Iron Gym Scapular. You'll see a video of me doing a voiceover of someone doing lat pull downs and cable rows, and we talk about the need for the shoulder blade. Okay, so scapular bone or whatever, scapular and shoulder blade is the same thing. So you need to allow the shoulder blade to move. And the reason why is we have a ridiculous amount of muscles connected to the shoulder blade and connected to the shoulder joint in general. So if we do like a shrug up and down, we know our shoulder would move. If we do kind of like a horizontal shrug, where we let our shoulders round forward, then we pull our shoulders back like we're doing like a cable row or something. The more we have our shoulders move, the more back muscles are involved in whatever that movement might be, okay? So we need to allow our shoulders to move. So if you do seated cable rows and you lock your shoulders in place and you're just plowing through them with bicep pressure, okay, bicep strength, that's going to limit your back development. you're going to get some lat involvement, which is why you're going to get width to your back. But if you don't allow scapular movement, if you don't allow your shoulder blades to move, that's going to be why you have limited back thickness development. So actually the best time that I ever had my back grow was when I had a partial tear in my bicep tendon. So I was at a gym up in Charlotte called Fitness Factory of Charlotte, which is a badass gym. They have a ton of equipment available, and I was actually at their old location way back in the day. But they had a seated cable row from Flex Fitness, I believe, and it went to 300 pounds, and I wanted to see if I could do it. So I warmed up, did a whole crazy workout where I did like sets of 10, like 200, 220, 240, 260, 280, then 300. And I had a great workout, but a couple days later, my arm was hurting like hell, and I had a really big issue for a couple months, like 6 months. I had a partial tear in my bicep tendon. So I went and got it scanned and, found out that was the case. But during that time, since I couldn't lift heavy, I had to be extremely mindful of lifting correctly. So that way I could still get stimulus in my back, but not have to use very heavy weight. Well, that actually led to the best time of my back growing because I was actually paying attention to technique and the quality of the movement. So in podcast number 220, titled Muscle Intention versus Movement Intention, we talk about the concept of having muscular, like a mind-muscle type connection, where you're doing an exercise based on the feel of the muscles, rather than just going through the movement itself. So when we squat, deadlift, or bench, or overhead press for like strength production, okay, or strength kind of like testing, we want to think of it as a movement. So I think of the deadlift as a whole entire movement. I do kind of consider what my quads, hamstrings, and glutes, are doing during the deadlift, but I don't really I'm not going slow enough to really feel them. I'm just kind of firing through the movement pattern, and I want to kind of focus on the movement as a whole. Well, when you do aesthetic-based training, you want to have muscle intention, meaning you're not worried about the movement as much as you're paying attention to what the muscle is doing. You're trying to constantly feel tension on the muscle of it extending and contracting at all times. So your intention of that exercise is what are the muscles doing. So podcast 220 talks about that. And if you take that approach, okay, of a muscular intention, and you allow the scapula, okay, the shoulder blades to move, that's going to involve way more muscles of your back. And it's going to get much, much, much better back development, ridiculously, significantly, overwhelmingly better development of the back. So, if you're not aware of what scapular movement is, go to YouTube, search Brutal Iron Gym Scapular, watch that video. Okay? Now, once you know that, it's then important to consider, okay, now that I know I can move correctly, what are the movements I might do that are best for me? We're going to go over that, okay, in a second. But first, we're going to talk about, once I know how to do movements correctly, I then figure out what the movements are correct for me, how many sets and reps, like what's my time and retention goals. So in podcast 214, we talk about, it's titled Understanding Rep Ranges and Expected Results. So we talk about what rep ranges are best for which outcome you would like from your training. So if I do exercises of like 10 seconds or less, it's more so just kind of testing my strength and showing off a little bit. Exercises of like 10 to 20 seconds-ish build strength, and these aren't, definitive ranges. They're kind of blends from one range to the next. And then exercises of like 20 to 30 seconds are more like muscle damaging, therefore they produce more muscular development, assuming your nutrition supports that. But they're a little bit harsh on the joints. So activities of 30 to 40 seconds are still kind of muscular development based, but they're friendly on the joints. Activities of 40 to 60 seconds kind of run into more muscular endurance. You'll get some muscle damage through what's called metabolic damage, which is just annoying the hell out of your muscle cells. And that'll get some development, and it's the most joint friendly. Now, what of those ranges I need is determined largely by the frequency of training. So if I train back 2 to 3 times a week, I don't need to lift as heavy on the movements as if I were to only train my back once a week. So a lot of the females that I train, we train back 3-4 times a week because since in general females are not going to be as strong as males, of course there's exceptions. But in general, females are going to be using like lower weight loads. for like barbell bent over rows and dumbbell rows and stuff like that. So we might train more frequently, but maybe in the 30 to 60 second range, so we don't beat the living shit out of the joints if we're always cranking on heavy things for 20 seconds. Whereas if I'm only training the back once, I better sure as hell get some heavy stuff in there, so that way I can make sure that the damage effect of the training lasts longer in recovery. So I can have longer chance or a higher degree of stimulus of change for my body to make that change. So the more frequently I train, the lighter of weight loads I need, assuming I still stay within the proper ranges of 30 to 60 seconds. Okay, so if that was a little bit crazy, you can listen to podcast 214, and that explains that. So now we kind of know that we have to have our shoulder blades moved to have best back development. We also know that there's now a relation to the frequency of back training compared to the time under tension that I want per movement that I choose. Okay, and again, podcast 214 tells you those time under tension ranges, and the less frequently you train, the heavier you must go. The more frequently you train, the lighter you can get away with. Okay, now what about the specific exercises we choose? Now, this will be dependent on what type of development you want. So in general, again, if you think male versus female, don't have to always think this way, but it is one way of thinking, is most males will want width of their lats the whole way from their hip to their armpit. So they want the lat to be as wide as it can be. They also want a ton of thickness, not only in the upper back, but also mid-back, lower back. They kind of want overall all of the back developed. Now, if you work with females doing certain aesthetics, a lot of females will want some detail to their back. They want some muscle bumps. And it's good to work on that V taper, okay, by having the upper lats developed well. But they won't really want really thick lower lats because it's going to make them look like kind of like a gorilla. And they're not going to want super huge traps because it makes them look like they have a big thick neck. So for females and males, depending on whether you want full overall back development, which of course a female can want that and a male could not want that. Then there's also the chase after the V taper, which again, some females might not want and some males might want. So for example, men doing doing men's physique, where they wear board shorts and do aesthetic-based competitions like that, they maybe don't want large traps. They maybe don't want large lower lats. They want more of that V taper and kind of back detail. So they're going to go for more of that type V taper development. So if we think of overall back development, okay, so what would be our kind of exercise choices when we look at overall development instead of that, or in other than the V taper? So overall back development means we want traps. We want lat width the whole way from the armpit to the waist. We want thickness the whole way from my neck to my butt. Okay, so all the back. We want all the muscles. So if we want that, typically the exercise order that I would write for the average client, meaning I have no clue what the hell your back looks like right now, okay, is we would do some type of angled or horizontal shrug. That means that we're not doing the traditional shrug where you stand up straight up and down. So we want to have some type of forward lean to us when we do a dumbbell or barbell shrug. Okay, just a little bit of a bend, just a kind of a 10 to 15 degree tilt forward. That's going to help us not only hit the upper traps, but also the mid and lower traps, which adds thickness to the upper back. So again, if you're trying to develop thickness to your upper back, you want to do dumbbell shrugs, barbell shrugs, where you bend your knees, you push your hips back, and actually have your upper body tilted forward to some degree. You still want to have the balance in the middle of your foot, so don't lean forward over your toes. Just push your butt back to create the upper body tilt. So not leaning forward to create the tilt, push your butt back to create the tilt. Keep the weighted resistance, whether it's a barbell or dumbbells, centered over mid-foot. Do not let it go out over your toes. Okay? We can also think of chest-supported rows. Instead of doing a row where you bend your elbow, just contract your scapula. So just like we would do a shrug where we don't really have an elbow bend, You can do that in any body angle. So you can do that with dumbbells laying against a flat bench, 15-degree incline, 30-degree incline, 45-degree incline. So those are also called seal rows, S-E-A-L rows, seal rows. Instead of doing the row where you actually bend your elbow, you would just do a scapular retraction. Okay? And if you don't know what scapular retraction is, just YouTube that. You would do scapular retractions at angles or horizontal angles, but not up and down, because up and down only works the upper part of the trap. And don't do the shrugs where you come up and then roll your shoulders back. Okay, you just look like a dumbass, because gravity only works up and down. So if you're moving your shoulders forward and backward against gravity, you're an idiot, because it's not doing anything. So do not do shrugs where you make your shoulders go in circles. Okay, that's stupid. It does not work that way. So you have to go against gravity to get resistance. So you have to tilt your body, okay, by pushing your butt back to get to some angle while you're doing standing dumbbell or barbell rows, or you can do seal rows. You can do a chest supported row machine, but again, just through scapular retractions rather than elbow bends. Then we would do some type of row. You can pick any grip you want, really doesn't matter. Okay, just use variety over time. So don't repeat the same grip all the time, use a variety of them. Then you would do a pull up or pull down, okay, depending on your abilities and skill sets and the equipment available to you. And then we would pick a weakness. So if you feel like you needed more lat development, you would do more pull-ups and pull-downs. If you need more mid-back development, you do more rows. Okay? So you have an angled or horizontal shrug, like a scapular retraction. You then do a row with any hand angle you want. You do a pull-up or pull-down with any hand angle you want. And then you either pick a row or a pull-up again. And again, the row would be if you want to focus more on mid-back, kind of detail and thickness. And a pull-up or pull-down would be if you want to focus more on lats, which will give you width. Okay? Now, the V-taper format is different. We don't do any shrugs. So the V-taper format is you start with pull-ups and pull-downs, and you specifically want to take a wide overhand grip. You can vary the width of that overhand grip, okay, from workout to workout. You can even do an angled overhand versus a flat overhand, okay, depending on what type of equipment you have available. But you want to start with pull-ups or pull-downs, and you want to do an overhand wide grip with various widths from workout to workout. Then you go into a row, and again, an overhand wide grip is going to be best for V-taper development. And then again, we go back to a pull-up or pull-down. So typically what I do is if somebody's strong enough to do pull-ups, we do those first. We do a row, and then we come back and do some type of pull-down. So we kind of vary a little bit on the stimulus as much as we can with their abilities. Then you would enter a weakness, and that weakness again depends on what is actually weak for that person. So sometimes people wanting to develop the best V-taper, we have to actually work on thoracic mobility to actually improve mid-back development. So if we need scapular movement, we actually have to make sure our scapulas can move, our shoulder blades can move. So sometimes you have to focus on thoracic mobility, which is almost like a rebuilding or rehab kind of process. So you might need to use that as warm-ups, okay, thoracic mobility warm-ups. But that is the general format we would use. So overall back development is an angled or horizontal shrug, like a scapular retraction, a row, pull up or pull down, and then what you either repeat a row or pull up or pull down depending on what you want to focus. A row is mid-back development, pull up or pull down is lat development. For V-taper, we start with pull-ups or pull-downs with a wide overhand grip. You then go to a row with a variation of a wide overhand grip. Then you go to pull-ups or pull-downs, any grip you want, and then you pick on any weakness that you want, even if it's thoracic mobility as an option. Okay? So, podcast 214 will tell you more about rep range and time under tension ranges. And remember that the more often you train, the less heavy you have to train. And it's actually a good idea not to train heavy because it won't beat the shit out of your joints. And then make sure that when you do train your back, you allow for scapular movement. So again, you can go to YouTube and search Brutal Iron Gym, scapular, S-C-A-P-U-L-A-R, and that'll give you that video on teaching or learning how to identify if you're moving your shoulder blades while you're performing back exercises. Okay, so quick resources we have. One good book resource is titled Strength Training Anatomy Workout 2 by Frederick Delavere. Okay, that's the name of the author. But the book name is Strength Workout Anatomy 2. So if you're a visual learner That book is fantastic because it has exercise descriptions as well as pictures and kind of tells you everything you need to know about the exercise. Even tells you what to avoid and what cautions there are. Then for YouTube, you can search for Josh Bryant, Bryant, and John Meadows. And it sounds like what it is spelled. So Meadows, Meadows. So Josh Bryant and John Meadows are two of my favorite people. They have some videos out there with back information or back exercises, and they're incredibly, incredibly intelligent people. So they have very unique ways of getting after the muscles, but not so unique that it's actually not productive. They stay with the basics. They just do the basics right, and that's the main goal. Okay? So hopefully this gave you a quick little rundown on how to structure your training. So the number one thing to absolutely be most important is the quality of your movements. So podcast 220 talks about muscle intention versus movement intention, and you can go to YouTube and search for that scapular movement video. Then we want to make sure that we're using the right rep ranges and time under tension, okay, for our frequency of training. And then we have the right exercise choices in order, okay? So hopefully this is all the good information. If you want to write a quick summary of this information, I can send you the handout that I'm reading from right now, or a little outline, and that'll help if you can't write this stuff down. But this will give you the best chance to have full back development, where you not only have width, but you also have thickness, and you have the overall shape correct to your goals, whether you want overall back development or whether you want the V-taper. Cool. Okay. So if you want any help from us, we do write training programming for people. And like I said, we've helped people get pro cards. So if you're interested in what those programmings would look like, email us at brutalirongym@gmail.com, and we'll help you out. Okay? Or if you just have some general questions and you just want to kind of get some quick info, email us that as well. Cool. If you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. Also, if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. The podcast is for you, so we know what you want to learn about. You can tell us more at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening. And thank you for watching.